Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Today we have the pleasure to start a new webinar series for EUniWell. For those of you who are not familiar with EUniWell, EUniWell is a European University Alliance formed of 11 universities around Europe. And today we are going to start a new webinar series, which is a webinar series within one of the thematic arena of EUniWell, which is the thematic arena on environmental change and well-being. Please, if you are interested with this thematic, go on the website and check for information of other activities and how to be further involved in the project. Then about this webinar series, the name we choose for the webinar series is New European Bauhaus meets EUniWell. Indeed, the aim of this series of webinar is to connecting more with what is the European network around this idea of the New European Bauhaus, which has been called by the European Commission as the operational arm of the Green Deal. Indeed, the objective of the New European Bauhaus is really to enhance projects and networking around the principle of sustainability, inclusion, and beauty. And indeed, these are concepts very close to the principle guiding the EUniWell Alliance. So that's why we decided to start this series of webinar in order to try to connect people around this thematic and particularly to gather experts, but also students and civic society around this topic, trying to pursue one of the aim of the Alliance, which is to be really a civic university. So let's go to the topic of today. Today we will have the pleasure to hear from Professor Francesco Ferrini from the University of Florence. He is professor at the University of Florence in the Department of Agriculture, Food, Environmental and Forest Science, and is particularly expert in tree crops, urban forestry, and landscape management. The topic for today, as you have seen from the title of the webinar, is Future-Proof Green Cities, Urban Biodiversity, Well-being, and Climate Resilience. So some technicalities before we start with the presentation by Francesco Ferrini. As you can see, you will have a chat box and also a question and answer box. So please feel free to put whatever comments or question there. I will try to follow all your inputs and collect them throughout the presentation of Professor Ferrini. And then at the end, we will have time to share opinion and share the question and comments with the professors to start engaging in a conversation before going to the end of the meeting. So thank you very much again for being here today. I will now leave the floor to Professor Ferrini.
Thank you very much, Sara, for the nice presentation, and I will share my screen. I hope the screen is now, my screen is now visible to all of you. And do you see the screen, Sara? My screen? Okay, yes. Perfect. Okay, perfect. So our trip starts from 1900s when you know the biggest city in the world at that time was London with more than 6 million citizens. New York was in the second place, and as you can see, 6 out of 10 of the biggest city in the world were from Europe. So Europe at that time was really the first continent and the most populated continent in the world. And at that time, the Patrick Geddes, who was a landscape architect and also a botanist who migrated from Scotland to the United States, looking at New York, he said that a city is more than a place in space, it's a drama in time, because he, with this phrase, he rejected the concept of the city made just of bricks and concrete. He was, his opinion was to plan the new cities, the future cities, like cathedral, for people to get together, to allow to develop the civic sense of the citizens at that time, and to develop also the mental well-being of the people. He considered the city like a museum or a university. So that's why he pushed the people to realize parks and gardens in the city of 1900s. But his suggestion and the suggestion from other people before this First World and Second World War were not well, heard, because in 2012 you see like the city heads had begun so big compared to 1900s, and this rank that dates about 13 years ago. You see, the only city which was in the first rank was New York with 20 million citizens, but all the other cities were from other continents, mainly from Asia and Central or South America. So at that time, only 9 cities from Europe were among the first 100 largest cities in the world. So you see that these numbers show how the city became bigger and bigger and bigger. In 2024, which was a few months ago, this rank changed again. As you can see, none of the city which was in the first rank dating back to 1900s is in this rank. Tokyo is still the first. New Delhi is the second, but Dhaka from Bangladesh is the 4th position, and most of the cities are from Asia, some from Central or South America, and one is from Africa. It's Cairo City, but probably Lagos in a few years, Lagos will be in this rank, and 2 cities out of 10 are from India. And the forecast for the future is that nearly 70% of the entire world population will live in urban areas in 2050. So in a few years, 25 years from now, 70%, more than 2/3 of the entire world population will live in urban areas. But this is already more than true for some countries, like, for example, you see Italy, 72% of the people who are now living in Italy live in urban areas. And if you take a look of the European countries, European countries, these are the 47 European countries. You see that some countries, even countries that are considered not really populated, like the Finland, Denmark, Sweden, or Norway, now host their population mainly in urban areas, with Sweden close to 90%, and Finland 86%, and Norway 84%. So even in those countries which are not so densely populated, most of the people live in urban areas. And our cities, unfortunately, are gray. Those who are my age or a little younger or even older, I'm sure they remember this picture, because it was the picture that was on the at that time was called Long Playing Animals from Pink Floyd, dating back to 1974. This is the Battersea Power Station in London, which was a really gray landscape at that time. And I will show you how it's now. So the present city can be all of those things I have written in this slide: chaotic, gray, polluted, hot, dangerous, noisy, overcrowded, and trafficked. And this brings a whole series of mental distresses and worsening our mental and physical health and well-being. And this also amplifies depression, anxiety, and brings the attention deficit disorder, especially in the younger people. But at the same time, the city can be fascinating. It can be open, artistic, beautiful, advanced, modern. You can find work, you can find new ideas in the city. The city can be at the same time alive, lively, and livable, which are three adjectives which are different, even though they have the same root, but they mean different things. But I think that the city now should be alive, lively, and livable. And so for this, these cities need to be regenerated. You see the same station, the Battersea Power Station, is not just the color of the picture, because the previous picture was black and white. This is a color picture, but it's because it was completely transformed by adding some trees, some shrubs, some lawns. It looks completely different, and it's now one of the most lively and livable places in London. And so we need to regenerate our city. By regenerating does not mean just repairing, rebuilding, or redeveloping. To regenerate means something different. It means that we must create cities that are more sustainable and more human scale. In this way, we can counteract all the bad things that cities usually bring with them, which are the noise, the pollution, the overcrowding, and so on. And this is in line with the Objective 11 of the Millennium Development Goals, which states that we have to build sustainable cities and community, especially in the sub-article, especially in 11.6, is probably the most important of this goal of the Millennium Development Goals. To do this, we have to change the paradigm. Changing the paradigm means that we need to be reactive. We need to be, proactive, because in the past, especially in the Mediterranean countries, our behavior was to react to something that has already happened. Now we have to be proactive, which means we have to actively seek the identification of risky condition, and we have to analyze all the organization processes. The next step will be to be predictive, and then we should try to be preemptive, which is very difficult for our mind, but this is what we need. We need to be predictive and to be preemptive to prevent what will be the future of our city. So to do this, I think that having a healthy urban forest is probably the most important thing for any city in the world that prioritizes its environmental and social outcomes. It's not just a matter of environment, it's also a matter of social engagement of the people. And for this, some key actions are needed. These key actions can be reached by having in mind clear targets. The first target is to improve health and well-being of the people, and EUniWell has inside its scope to improve health and well-being of people and the students all over Europe, and not only, mitigating the urban heat island, to manage the runoff, the stormwater, which is a real problem, especially with climate change. We are having more and more extreme events wherever in the world, but especially in the Mediterranean basin, to reduce pollution, which is still very high, in spite of the fact that we have done a lot of things to reduce pollution, to preserve biodiversity, and eventually to increase CO2 sequestration and storage. But these targets must be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based, because sometimes, especially politicians, set some targets which are not achievable. Sometimes they're not time-based and they're not that specific. So what we need to do is to have clear in mind what are our targets and how to reach them in a time-based period. And so coming to the core of the presentation, which is biodiversity, because I'm involved in the National Biodiversity Future Center of the National Plan of Recovery and Resilience. The role of biodiversity is bigger than probably most of the people think, because as I've said a couple of years ago, the challenge is to meet the needs of the human population, which are increasing day by day, without excessively reducing biological diversity. And this is one of the biggest challenge we have to face in the next future. And this is why new approaches are needed to preserve and to increase the biodiversity in the urban environment. And the research is doing a lot of things. You see how the research paper, which were in the Scopus database, I checked yesterday, actually the date is wrong, it's 28th of April, so I checked yesterday. You see how there has been an increase in the paper that has, in the papers that have the word urban plant and biodiversity in the abstract. So from less than 200 in 2017 to more than 400 in 2024, and probably this year we'll have more than 500 papers that deal with the topic of biodiversity in urban environment. Just a brief history of the word biodiversity. The word biodiversity probably was first pronounced by Rosen in 1985, even though it was Ed Wilson that in 1988 published the first article with the word biodiverse, and he published, it was the editor of the book Biodiverse. So we can say that the word biodiverse is quite young. It's now 40 years old, so it's still in a very early stage, but it has become very, very important, I would say fundamental for our future. But what we really mean by urban biodiversity, because biodiversity is one thing, urban biodiversity is another thing. There are several definitions. For example, in 2009, Werner and Zaner, two researchers, defined the urban biodiversity as the animals and plants living within the settled areas of a city. This is the definition. But some other researcher and an organization like the MEMROT define biodiversity in a different way, not so different, but I would say that probably the best definition is from Pupimet and other authors who said that urban biodiversity refers to the variety and variability among living organisms found in a city and the ecological systems in which they occur. Because in the city, contrary to what we normally think, there is more biodiversity than people might expect. Because in the city, we have autochthonous or native species plus the species which have been introduced by the people. So we have a high alpha diversity in terms of the number of species. And we can consider also the city like a bank for the conservation of some key species that can be protected in the city. The most important thing to be underlined is that we have a huge, probably a higher biodiversity in the city compared to the rural environment. But what we have found so far is that there is an homogenization throughout, especially the northern hemisphere. So the great cities of the three boreal continents, Asia, Europe, and North America, host species that are quite similar to each other. So you find the same trees in Moscow, in Brussels, in Madrid, in Rome, and probably some of these species are also quite common in New York or maybe in Chicago. So that's the problem, the homogenization of the vegetation. There are several reasons why we should preserve biodiversity in our cities. I'm not going through all these reasons, but you can see that the International Day for Biological Diversity, the organization of the local governments for sustainability, which is known as ICLEI, in some years ago, provided these 10 reasons to preserve biodiversity in our cities, which are all very, very important. And why biodiversity is so important? Sorry, I have a mouse which is very sensible. Thomas Jefferson, who was the third president of the United States, who was also a scientist like other presidents, in the early age of the United States, like Lincoln or Washington. Thomas Jefferson said that if one link in nature's change might be lost, another might be lost, till the whole system of things should vanish by piecemeal, suggesting that every single piece of biodiversity is important to maintain the chain intact. If one ring of the chain breaks, the whole chain can break. So we have to preserve any single living beings in the world to maintain this chain that protects the world. So probably the loss of biodiversity is one of the biggest threats in the world. It has been calculated that the loss of biodiversity costs from $2,000 to $20,000 trillion every year to the whole world. So a huge amount of money that is lost because of loss of biodiversity. And you know that the European Commission has issued a strategy for biodiversity for 2030. So we have to follow the guidelines from the European Commission. And what this guideline said is that we have to create a broader network of protected areas, and we have to launch a European plan for nature restoration. We have to introduce measures to enable the necessary radical change. Most of the people in the world think that there is a connection between the increase in human population and extinction of a species. That is true. You see how from the late 1800s to the most recent years, the extinction rate is parallel to the increase in human population. So these things are tightly connected. And this is another very important thing. You see that if we continue to behave like we had up to 2010, we will lose more than 17% of the total biodiversity by 2100. If we increase the conservation efforts, probably will have the same biodiversity that we had in 2010, probably in 2200. If we increase the conservation effort with more sustainable production, with more sustainable consumption, probably we will have the same biodiversity that we had in 2010 in 2070, 2075. So it means that it will need 60 to 65 years to restore the biodiversity that we had in 2010, which was already much lower compared to the biodiversity that we had in 1800. Plant biodiversity is very important, and sometimes we don't consider plant when we talk about biodiversity. Probably this is due to the plant blindness phenomena because we don't see really the plants. We see just a green background in our lives. In our lives, we see a green background in the wood, but we are not able to distinguish the real biodiversity. And you see how actually the living beings which are critically endangered are mostly plants like conifers, for example, like dicots and cycads and so on, while at the same time, for example, birds and insects are not so endangered compared to plants. So which are the main direct causes of urban biodiversity loss? First is land and use changes, overexploitation of resources, climate change, pollution, and invasive alien species. And most of these things are strictly interconnected. So we have to work to all these 5 main direct causes to reduce the urban biodiversity loss and the loss of biodiversity throughout the world. The most important thing is probably the relationship that exists between biodiversity and climate change, because these 2 things are strictly connected. 2 questions mainly raised. The first question is why biodiversity is so important in urban environment, and the second question is just a matter of the number of the species or is something else? And we'll see in a while some answer. That biodiversity is probably our strongest natural defense against climate change. But at the same time, climate change is a primary driver of biodiversity loss. So these 2 things, as I said before, are very strictly interconnected. And we have to work on both things to maintain the biodiversity and at the same time to reduce the impact of climate change, and because these 2 things cannot be separated. And in the recent years, several papers have been published regarding the relationship between urban biodiversity and climate change. These are some examples. I just chose 4 of them, but you can find a lot if you go through the internet in Google Scholar or Scopus. There is another big threats to biodiversity, which is war. Biodiversity is the silent victim of war, the effect of modern war and military activities on biodiversity and the environment. Again, a silent victim, how nature becomes a casualty of war. These are some titles of, New York Times and other very important magazine or journals that have underlined the strict relationship between war and loss of biodiversity. Biodiversity is so important to fight and to reduce the impact of climate change. That urban forest is the biggest help we have to reduce the urban heat island. But it's not only the tree cover which is important. Biodiversity is also important. You see how a more biodiverse urban forest is more efficient in reducing the temperature of the city. So the cooling effect of the urban forest is higher if the forest is composed by different species, different canopy size, different leaves, different color, and wherever. And it has been shown by several papers. This is one of the papers I have checked to prepare this presentation. Several papers have shown that the higher is the vegetation diversity, the better is the cooling intensity of the single species. So any species can can have a cooling efficiency, but if different species are pulled together, the cooling efficiency is higher. And as you can see here, the Shannon index is probably the most common index which is used to measure biodiversity. You see how the summer days with temperature more than 32 degrees are decreasing with the increase of Shannon index. So it's very important to have the highest biodiversity we can in the city to increase the cooling effect of the urban forest. And this impact is independent of tree cover. This is very important. So it's not just a matter of tree cover, it's a matter of how biodiverse is the tree cover in the city. So this has several implications for urban planning, and it suggests that we must increase biodiversity to increase the impact of cooling effect in the urban environment. More about this, you see how different is the cooling effect of different vegetation. If I plant just trees, the cooling effect is quite remarkable. It's 0.6. If I plant trees and shrubs, it's 0.9. If I'm able to restore a secondary forest, the effect is 1.7. It means it is almost 3 times as much compared to plant just trees. So when people say we have to plant trees, it's something that we have to do, but we have to plant trees and try to reestablish a secondary forest, because the effect would be at least 2 times, maybe 3 times as much. And you see how, for example, the tree size is important in reducing the surface temperature and also the canopy density. So we have to choose all the species which have a big size and they have a quite dense canopy to increase the effect of tree planting. This is some results of research we have done some years ago in 2 different cities in Europe, Rimini and Krakow. These are the results of in Rimini. You see how, for example, black poplar and Quercus robur, English oak, were more effective in reducing the air temperature, because their transpiration is very high. It's much higher compared to other species like, for example, horse chestnut or other common species which are used in our cities. Also, it's important the biodiversity of shapes. The more diverse are the shape of the urban green areas, the higher is the cooling effect. Also the form of the leaves, the more diverse is the form, the higher is the effect on cooling, and also the form of the canopy has some effects on the cooling effect, the cooling capacity of the urban forest. So we can say that biodiversity improve the climate of the city, but also increases the urban forest resilience. That is very important. You know that, for example, if you have different species and you have to face a new disease, a new pest, a new pathogen, or a new insect, if you have a very biodiverse urban forest, probably you will lose a few of the trees. But if you have, a low biodiversity low biodiverse urban forest, you will lose sometimes 1/3, sometimes half of the population. This is very important because these also increase, the higher biodiversity increase the forest resilience to storm and to pest and disease. Coming to human health and well-being, which is one of the scope of EUniWell consortium, university consortium, we can say that research shows that a nature, an environment very rich in biodiversity has positive effect, positive benefits for mental and physical well-being of the people. And we can say that human well-being is very dependent on the interaction between all the network of living species and the human life. We know by our own experience that having contact with nature can stimulate a lot of positive emotion like calm, joy, creativity. It lowers, the problem of depression and anxiety, and this effect has been shown that are greater if the biodiversity of the urban forest is greater. And this is a research we have done 10 years ago. We have published 10 years ago, and with other colleagues from other universities in Italy. And we found that there was a positive effect of biodiversity on well-being of the individuals who were visiting urban and peri-urban green areas. So these are all the relationship between human health and biodiversity, and these are some papers which have been recently published in different scientific journals like Environmental Research +1 or scientific reports that shows how biodiversity can contribute to human health and well-being. And this is a book which was published a few years ago. I suggest you to read it because it's a very nice and well-written book. And as you can see here, as we have seen before about the effect of biodiversity on cooling effect of the urban forest, you see here how the Shannon index was inversely related to the mortality for heart disease or for stroke. So the higher was the biodiversity in this research, the lower was the mortality for heart disease and for stroke in different cities. They have checked more than 800 California zip codes for heart disease and more than 200 zip codes for stroke from 2010 and 2018. And biodiversity and mental well-being. Mental well-being, as I said before, is associated with biodiversity. This is a research done in Canada. You have to think that at present, $16 trillion are spent every year to care for mental well-being all over the world. 800 billion euro in Europe and close to 15 billion euro in Italy are annually spent to care for any case of mental well-being, depression, dementia, Alzheimer, Parkinson, or schizophrenia, paranoid, and so on. And this is another paper. It's the paper we have published and have shown just a few minutes ago. And at the end, it's very important to know the relationship between children and biodiversity. Children are the future of our world, so we have to take particular care of them. And these are some of the most recently published research about the impact of biodiversity in the urban environment on children's health and well-being. Just a few examples, and I try to summarize what all these research say. The first is biodiversity improves immune health in kids, so it's very important. Nature promotes mental and physiological and psychological well-being. There is a better adaptation to the climate change, especially for the little ones. And this brings to say that we have to rethink the urban spaces, not just the urban green spaces, but all the urban spaces, considering nature as an ally, not something that is like an ornament and so on. There are some studies. For example, I'm working at the university. Some of you, I know, they work in a university. You see how the biodiversity can positively impact physical and mental well-being of university students. This research was published a couple of years ago. They found that the green landscape could alleviate college student physical and psychological stress, and also an increasing biodiversity was positively correlated with relaxation and other psychological signal from the student. And so we can say that diversity, and in this case, biodiversity, is the key against adversity, not only plant adversity, but our adversities. We have seen how different, problems, physical and mental problems can be somewhat not so problematic if you have urban green spaces and if you have biodiverse urban green spaces. So how should be the future-proof green city? Because this is the question of my presentation. We have to plan the new cities keeping in mind an ecological perspective on human benefits, not just adding trees to the city, but planning the new cities considering human benefits. And you see how the increasing population does not mean always that we have a decrease in biodiversity. For example, in Berlin, the increasing population after the mid 1800s brought also an increase in biodiversity. And it's very nice, the publication I found, and that the picture on the right part of this slide, you see how a moderate urbanization is even positive for plant biodiversity. Why? A highest urbanization can reduce the biodiversity, as quite obviously, and the importance of the green connectivity, the green corridors. You see how providing connecting corridors from one green spaces to another, it's important in increasing animal biodiversity, not only animal, also plant biodiversity, while at the same time increasing the sealed surface, which means the soil sealing decrease the biodiversity, which is quite obvious. And you can also see how human design features, for example, of a public square, can affect biodiversity. Biodiversity can go from a very low biodiversity if a place is planned like in the lower left part of the slide, to an increase of biodiversity if a square is planned like in the lower right part of these slides. And this publication this paper was published in Nature Cities last year. It's very important because it says something that we have to keep in mind. Also, we have to keep in mind that having not just green but also blue infrastructure is important to support, for example, insect biodiversity. We depend mostly on insect biodiversity. Most of the food that we are eating any single day, we can eat it because someone, which is called insect, has provided the pollination and the fertilization of sunflowers, and then the production of food. 70% of the food that has produced in the world is produced thanks to the pollinators. So we have to keep in mind this when we realize a new green area, also to provide some blue infrastructure to support insect biodiversity. And then we have to consider the density configuration of the city. You see how the same density, which means in this case 75 dwellings per hectare or per 0.01 square kilometers, can have different effect on biodiversity, because in the lower case you see there is a big urban green space, and there are connection between the buildings. So it's very important how to plan the future city, because we have different options. You see the same density but different configuration of the density, and we have to provide ecological connection with the hub and spokes. The hub and spokes is like the wheel of the bicycle, with the hub, which is the center of the wheel, and the spokes, which are the ray that connect the hub to the rubber of the tire. And so this is the same concept that we use in the National Biodiversity Future Center. There is a hub, and there are all the spokes all over Italy, which are cooperating together for making the hub working, So this is the same philosophy. We have to have a big hub, which means a big green space at the center, which is connected to all the other smaller green space with some ecological corridor, which can favor the movement also of the animals and of the flora. And so we have to take care of all the groups of biodiversity. This is a paper we have published last year, and these are all the possible action for the conservation, restoration of native vegetation in urban landscape. So it's very important to, as I said before, to provide the highest connectivity between different habitats in the city. We have to design the future city based on biodiversity, not just the plant biodiversity, not just the animal biodiversity, but we have to provide a right proportion of lawns, shrubs, and trees in our green areas to have the highest impact on biodiversity. So it's not a matter of number of species that we can use in our future planning, but it's how these different species can be used it can be meshed together in the new green spaces. As you can see here, for example, riparian corridors has a very high native species biodiversity and a very low management intensity and very low economic inputs. The more planned, the more designed, the more complex is the green space, the lower is the native species biodiversity. So we have to preserve mainly, the natural features which are already present in our cities. And coming to the end, we shouldn't forget the importance of microbiome. We often make confusion between microbiota and microbiome, which are two different things. But we have to think that our body is mainly made of microbial cells. We have between 70 and 90% of microbial cells in our body, and we have 99% of microbial genes in our body. If we take into consideration a human body, you see our genes, human genes, are just a piece of a foot compared to the entire body. And this is very important. So the next step is to know very well the potential importance of the new built environment and its impact on human health. You see, the more built is an environment, the lower is the microbiome that we can have. This is very important because especially the microbiome of the soil is very important for our health, the environmental health, and then our health inside the concept of One Health. Anytime we cover the soil with some impermeable materials, we produce a huge damage to our health and to the environment health, because covering the soil reduces a lot the soil biodiversity, which is fundamental, which is crucial, as I have written there, for ecosystem functioning and human well-being, because also climate change is connected with human biodiversity, and also sustainable management practices are very important to maintain this level of biodiversity. And this research, which was published a few years ago, has shown that people who live in a very green environment have a different microbiota, in this case, intestinal microbiota, compared to the people who live in a very built environment. I'm not saying, because I'm not a doctor, that it's worse or better, but you can see here people who live in a very green environment have different microflora in the intestine. So we have to design considering the microbiomes, and this is very important to see how microbial biodiversity decreased with the increasing urbanization, and how also biogenic pollutants are increasing with the increasing, the chemical pollutants are increasing with the increasing urbanization. And so at the end, we have to plan the next cities should be planned taking care of the microbiome. So there are several approaches in new urban planning. One approach is called the microbiome rewilding hypothesis. So trying to renaturalize city to increase the microbiome in the city. The second approach is the microbiome-inspired green infrastructure. The third is the biodiversity-sensitive urban design. And the fourth, probably is the more comprehensive approach, is the biodiversity-inclusive design. So it's a design that looks for promoting the function of the ecological system, the urban ecological system, and to enable the persistence of species inside the built environment and try to reconnect people with nature. So probably this one is the best of them. So coming to the end, we have to switch the 7 lamps of biodiversity. The 7 lamps of biodiversity were derived from the 7 lamps of architecture, which are sacrifice, truth, power, beauty, life, memory, and obedience. So the 7 lamps of biodiversity are the protection, connectivity, construction, and the cycles. And these are, all the different features. For example, we have to identify and protect areas of high biodiversity in the city. We have to maintain and reestablish connection between different habitats to build ecological feature, and also to preserve the natural cycles of the elements, water, nutrient, energy, and also light. The 5th lamp are the interactions, so the biological interaction between the different components of the urban environment. The 6th lamp is the animal welfare, and the 7th lamp is that what we have to look for is the novelty, because we don't know how this new combination of native and exotic species will work together, so we have to do research about that. Some cities provide some green indicators. Probably the best green indicators was like Malmo, for example, with the green space factor, like Stockholm with the Stockholm biodiversity factor. or Melbourne, which has the green factor tool, or at the end, probably the most comprehensive fact index, which is the City Biodiversity Index. It was proposed a few years ago in Singapore. That's why that's why it's called also the Singapore Index of Cities Biodiversity. And it's quite complicated. It's made of 28 different indicators, but you can find all the indicators and all the explanation in the handbook, which is downloadable for free through the internet. So just 3 more images. I don't know if you are familiar with this image. I cannot ask you what is this, but I'm providing the answer. This is not the planet that is breathing, but it's just the alternation of the season. You know, the winter season in the northern hemisphere and the growing season. So it seems like the earth is breathing, but actually it's just the changing due to the changing of the season. But it's very similar to a human body, and we have to consider our planet like a human body to preserve it. 2 more slides. This one it's recently a new magazine, which is Urban Science. It is about all the science that deal with the sciences that deal with the urban environment. So from the urban green spaces to the urban health to the urban planning and whatever. So you can check the magazine if you are interested in publishing in the magazine. And at the end, this is the last slide. I just want to remind the 3 rules, because we can live 3 weeks without food. We can live 3 days without drinking. We can live 3 hours, sorry, I forgot to translate the hour, 3 hours in a very extreme environmental condition, like too cold or too warm, but we cannot live more than 3 minutes without oxygen. So that is why we need trees, we need plants in our cities to produce the oxygen that we breathe every single second of our life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Ferrini, for this extremely interesting presentation and lecture. It was, I mean, for me, very inspiring, and I think also for the other participants. You touched upon a lot of different topics about biodiversity and the role of university, cities, and the connection between biodiversity and health. I think one of the things that catch my attention the most is how really, when talking about environmental change and well-being, emerge the need to think in a systemic or ecosystem approach, and how the different dimensions of health and environment are really linked together and might be taken into account together when design policy and action. And I think another takeaway is the importance of also properly analyze, with the help of science and experts, what we are the data and the results from science. For example, what you said about the fact that most of the time we hear about the need of planting more, but not really about the difference about planting more and what do we plant, and how biodiversity in planting is impacting a lot more than just planting more. And so again, the importance of communicate well the results of the research in this field. So thank you very much. Now I'm checking if there are questions in the question and answer box. Don't worry, I see someone has to go away. We are a little bit behind the schedule, but I think we can take some few extra minutes. If you have question, comment, please just write in the chat, or open the mic and ask. I'm checking if someone is writing something. Okay, someone is putting also.
Yes, very. I know that.
Okay. The individual tree data standard.
Yes.
So maybe while we are waiting, if someone has some question, I have one question. I think that based also on the project that you show, you have been involved also in conversation with municipality when it comes to.
Yes.
So my question is, how do you see the reaction of the municipality when talking about this issue of trying to better plan the cities in a way that accounts for biodiversity?
Up to probably before COVID, this topic was not considered in the new planning. So the idea was to plant what has been planted for decades, because it has shown to work quite well. Now some cities, also Florence, but other city in Italy and Europe, are seeking for new species, new meaning that which are not so common in the urban environment, to try if they can be more resilient compared to the species that we have used in the past, because we have to face, most of our urban areas, especially in the European continent, were planned with a different climate. So we have to change our approach to the new planning, because the climate is completely different from what it was 30, 40, 70 years ago. We have seen changes in the last 10 years. But if we compare the present to 30 or 40 years ago, the change has been dramatic. So we have to choose now what will be the most resilient species in 30, maybe 40 years, when we'll probably face a change which is not expected now, more bigger than we expect now. So it will not be 1.5, maybe it will be 3 degrees more on an annual basis, which is a huge increment compared to the past. And most of the species that we have used actually are working quite well, so we can keep on using them. I'm talking about European hackberry, plane tree, some tilia, or whatever. We have also to try to expand our knowledge about trees, not only trees, also shrubs, and also annual plants, which are more resilient to the future climate, or the climate which is predicted to be the normal climate in 30 or 40 years, especially for trees.
Clear. Thank you very much. And I'm looking in the chat. I see some other link to interesting paper, Exploring the Social and Cultural Values of Trees and Woodland in England, a new composite measure. I think also emerged from your presentation that there are like a lot of different indicators that have been developed and that could be interesting to explore, and also to see whether other cities could either monitor based on what some kind of indicator that already exists, or also develop some new indicator, because as you said, it's also important to take into consideration the different kind of environment and the socioeconomic situation of the cities in order to plan well. And also I see a comment from Emanuele saying, of course, thank you, Professor, for the intervention, and also the need for for an initiative to push for a legislative and homogeneous intervention for managing and protecting the public and urban green spaces. So I think this is also very different from country to country and also from municipality to municipality, because I think in some cases it's really regional or municipality kind of law that could have really an impact on deciding on that. So I don't know if you have any other question or comments. I'm checking the...
They can write to me anyway.
Exactly. So
my email is public, so...
Exactly. So you can write to Professor directly. And also to conclude, there will be also in the next few weeks, this webinar will be published also on our YouTube channel. So keep an eye on that. So I think we can conclude, and I would like to thank you again very much, Professor Ferrini, for today. It was extremely interesting, and I hope that this will lead to further conversation on that, not only at EUniWell, but for all the students, researchers, and people connected today also at their institution and their group. And to conclude, thank you very much to all for today, for following this first webinar. As you probably know, because it was also in the description of the event, this is the first of a series of webinars on the NEB, New European Bauhaus, and how its principles connect with the well-being and environmental change. So keep monitoring our website, because we will publish soon the program for the next, particularly most probably the next one will be in June. And thank you again very much, and see you soon for the next webinar.
Bye-bye. Thank you for coming.
Bye.